Welcome to Puck Academy, a show about how hockey players grow on and off the ice. I'm Jason Jacobs, the host, and each week I talk with players, coaches, and experts shaping the future of player development. Today's guest is Paul Cannata. Coach Cannata has more than 30 years of coaching and playing experience across NCAA and New England prep hockey. Early in his coaching career, he served as an assistant coach at Northeastern University for 6 seasons in Hockey East. And in 2003, or around that time, he took over as the head coach for boys varsity hockey at Milton Academy, where he spent the next 20 years. Now, during his time there, he inherited a program that was in poor shape, something like a 3-27 record in his first season. And over the 20 years, Coach Cannata succeeded in turning the program into a perennial top 10 New England prep contender. Under his leadership, Milton made 5 New England Elite 8 tournament experiences. They won the New England Championship in 2011 and reached the finals again in 2016. They captured 3 Independent School League titles, and in 2023, Milton won the Floodmar tournament for the first time since 1982. Now, I was excited for this one. I've known Coach Cannata for a while, and he's always struck me as someone with a lot of wisdom around the game of hockey for sure, but also around being a parent and just around life. But most of our discussions have been in passing when I see him in the rinks or when I see him at the gym. So I was so thrilled to have the chance to just get into a good long-form discussion with him and dig deep into some of these nuanced topics that, honestly, some casual banter and passing just doesn't do justice to. And this conversation does not disappoint. We get into a whole bunch of thorny topics around the sport of hockey, how it's changed over the years, the development path for kids, both around hockey and athletics, but also around academics and around life. We talk about parenting. We talk about what it's like to be a retired guy now, what he's doing with his time, and how he looks back fondly on all the decades that he spent in this magical sport. Without further ado, Coach Cannata, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, this is strange because usually when we talk and debate about youth hockey, it's in the gym locker room. So it's strange to be doing it in front of computers and microphones here.
Yeah, you got to be careful. People are not going to be quite sure what they just logged on to here. Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful for you making the time. I've been trying to pin you down for a while. You've just got such an interesting perspective on the game. And as someone who grew up playing the game and now is trying to navigate both the game, but also candidly, just being a parent, not just around sports, but it's like the whole landscape of everything has changed so much. And, the oldest, first one through the chute, as you've said, kind of gripping the stick tight, right? It's, I just have so many questions for you and so much that I can learn from you and listeners as well. So I'm grateful, especially in your retirement here, for you to make the time and come on and share some wisdom with us.
Yeah, I gotta get a tea time here in about an hour. So being retired, I didn't know it was pickleball or golf today. Those are the big decisions.
You're just showing off now. You're just rubbing salt in the wounds of all the working men and women who are running around from rink to rink to rink.
Well, I'm also running around. I say running. I'm going to be walking around to a few rinks. Yeah.
I mean, you're an empty nester now too, right?
It varies on the day. But yeah, we're at a certain stage of life, I guess you could describe it as.
Well, I've heard you come on plenty of not plenty of shows, but some shows and talk about your background in the sport and coming up in the game and growing up in West Roxbury and RL and Hamilton and the community rink and that. So, I mean, we could use our whole time just talking about your history. Maybe a better starting point so that we can maximize our time here is talk about your experience in the game growing up and maybe just reflect a bit on how that compares to the state of the game today.
Yeah, I think some would say that might as well have been, when the city of Boston was under siege by the British, in 1700s. Going into an
You're
MDC.
only a few years older than me, so I can't make too much fun.
Yeah, roughly 250 years old. But no, going into an MDC rink in 1972, 73, youth hockey, obviously very, very different. I think also growing, I always say I'm forever grateful for going to high school and college in the 80s. I just think, in hindsight, it was a great period. Obviously, pre-technology, pre a lot of things, but we did have the VCRs came on, and MTV came on, and cable TV came on, and CNN sort of. Anyways, but it was a great period. But here we are in 2025, and life is different for the young people. Life is there's different expectation of coaches and hockey programs and sports programs, different expectations for schools and teachers, and then obviously the delivery of the information, is different. Here we are.
Yeah, I mean, maybe before we even get to the hockey part, I mean, growing up, you got out of school, you got on your bike, and you played in the neighborhood. Now you get out of school and you probably get carted to 3 different structured things before you start your homework, right? How do you feel about that as a coach, as a teacher, as a dad?
Yeah, well, even going back to our, hey, Mom, I'm going out. What? I'm going out. Where are you going? Out. All right. I'll be back later.
Yeah, be home by dark.
That was it. And you look back too, you didn't really know where you were going out to. And when it comes to sports, I think, growing up in West Roxbury, I was probably going out to do something. It was stickball, it was two-hand touch, it was tackle, it was street hockey. It was something that we were doing, throwing a ball off the wall and cutting up a tennis ball. And yes, now, again, the delivery is different. The experience is different. In some ways, obviously, it's better. And maybe in some ways it presents some challenges. But I'm going to jump 3 steps ahead. I was over in Dorchester earlier this morning playing hockey with some of the old guys and some not so old guys. But Bill Cahill is a great coach. Some people who might be listening might know of him. His brother Peter has raised his family in Dorchester. Great family, originally from Central Mass. So Billy died of a heart attack as the assistant coach at RPI about 20 years ago. They had a fundraising event in the Dorchester MDC rink or Neponset MDC rink. And there was 4 teams of guys that played. And I remember jumping out there on a Sunday afternoon and you just mixed in. And some of the guys, really good players, played some levels of professional hockey. A bunch of the guys played college hockey, top Division I players, blah, blah, blah. And a bunch of the guys didn't play high school hockey. What I remember is all of the guys could play hockey. And not only could they all play hockey, but there were guys out there who did not even play high school hockey, who made plays, who had hands, and maybe their skating wasn't so great because they didn't, play a lot of actual hockey. But there was a lot of plays being made. I remember sitting on the bench and talking to some of the guys. I'm like, wow, if we could put some of what you guys have into some of what these younger kids have now, you got a player. But I think what I took away from that is all those guys grew up in the fashion that we're talking about. They played something every day, basketball, baseball, etc. So, and hockey, a lot of street hockey, a lot of pond hockey. They didn't play necessarily organized hockey, some of those guys. But what was amazing is they weren't far off those who played, call it a high level, a good level of college hockey. Nowadays, you just wouldn't see that. But jumping, 4 steps ahead of what I think we're going to talk about, I always fashion back to that day and just watching, the hockey being played.
And when you say, the guys coming up, if they could have more of what those guys have that you played with, what is it that you think the players coming up today are missing?
Well, I don't know that the player, I don't mean to come at it like in a negative light, but I think what's interesting is those guys had a feel for hockey, and they have a feel for hockey, and they have a feel for sports. I had a feel for making plays. And if you played street hockey 2 to 10 times a week, you're going to be pretty good at hockey. So your hands are there, your shooting's there. And if you're blending street hockey with basketball, like we didn't play soccer when I was young much, lacrosse wasn't around, but basketball, street hockey, versions of football were omnipresent. So I just think that feeling of space and timing, for some of them, incredibly creative, no look passes, drop passes. They had that. So I think nowadays you could have a player that can skate really well that doesn't have necessarily that feel for the game, the vision, the creativity, maybe the athletic sense. And again, I'm jumping 3 steps ahead, but oftentimes now with groups or players, it's some of the challenges aren't, in my eyes, necessarily even a hockey challenge. You would say to them, like, if you're playing 2-on-2 basketball in your driveway, what would you do? This isn't necessarily hockey. This is just 2 players and 2 players, or 3 players and 3 players, or 2 players and 1 players, or 2 people. What would you do? What would you do offensively, or what would you do defensively? And I just remember that day, looking at these guys. I'm like, hey, did you play at BCI? No, I played freshman year, and then we didn't have enough money, or whatever happened, or I got cut. And you say, wow, you're a pretty good hockey player. So it has stuck with me.
I think about that too. One of the challenges is that because everyone's got their kids so overscheduled, if you want to step off the train, you look around and none of that infrastructure of free play is there. Like you look out in the neighborhood, like I look out in my neighborhood and all I see is Waze directing cars down my street at 50 miles an hour, right? And there aren't any kids playing, right? Because the kids are all off at, Russian math or whatever, right? And then what's the alternative to scheduling stuff? It's sitting home on the phone, right? Like scrolling Instagram, scrolling Snapchat, like, bullying kids online, like getting yourself in trouble. And so it's like, all right, well, I guess the better alternative is to keep them busy as crazy, because then it keeps them out of trouble. But then it's like at what price? So in some ways I want to go back, but in other ways, like wanting to go back to a world that doesn't exist anymore is just it's just dreaming. It's not reality.
I think what we can do is, well, the only thing we can do, and we talk about coaches, is you can control what you can control. So with coaches, youth coaches, prep school coaches, college coaches, you can control if you have the ice from 4 to 5 or 6 to 7, you do control the activities during that hour. So as a youth coach, okay, they're not getting, they didn't play street hockey all afternoon before they came to the rink. So let's provide them with the opportunity to play hockey. And maybe it's not perfect, but in many ways it is perfect. They're there to play. They signed up to play hockey. When your kid is 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, you sign them up to play hockey. So let's allow them, when they come to the rink, to play hockey. And then, okay, now you start slicing and dicing. What does that look like? And it doesn't mean that you're not going to do some skating activities or some specific stick handling or passing, skill development, call it what you want. But within that, there's going to be an opportunity to play for a lot of reasons. One being physical health. Kids didn't sign up to come and stand in line and leave with a cold head. But that's something we can control. You're a little league coach as well, or soccer coach. Give the kids an opportunity to play and allow them to have some version of the experience maybe that we had.
I've heard you talk on other shows about how one of the reasons you think that the sport has gone more year-round is just the economics of the rinks being privatized and needing to pay the bills. One thing I wrestle with as a parent is, in the long term, multi-sport is great. You don't want your kid to burn out. You don't want them to have overuse injuries. You want them to follow their passion. You want them to be well-rounded. You want them to, have lots of experiences at an early age. At the same time, some of my best memories in life are from high school hockey, right? And actually the landscape to even play in high school, let alone in college, let alone in pros, right, is getting harder and harder, such that there's a lot of pressure on kids and families to keep up. And especially as the lines blur between club and prep, right? I mean, you have like prep schools, for example, might bias towards kids that come from a certain club. In order to get on that club, you need to be the best, not in the long term, but like during tryout season, right? And so how do you balance that as a parent? How do you balance that as a kid in terms of best for long term with also like needing to just like stay on the train practically?
Yeah. Well, it's a free country. And I've said a million times, both countries are free countries. Canada's a free country. U.S. is a free country. Another thing we control is we can choose how to spend our free time as a family. And that's up to everybody. But I guess the conversation oftentimes comes back to, okay, are we talking about elite, quote unquote, elite player development? But even with that, okay, I always say, even if your goal is to be the best hockey player in Massachusetts, the country, the world, great. It's a worthy endeavor. Nobody will ever tell me that along the way, playing, or convince me, I should say, that playing basketball, playing baseball, playing football, playing tennis, playing golf, all of those, surfing, belly boarding for kids. The beach is a natural playground. A pond is a natural playground. Jumping off a dock is a natural playground. Skateboarding. Nobody will ever tell me that or convince me that those activities aren't going to help you be the best athlete that you can be. So I think really also we can control when a kid is 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, we just for argument's sake stop there. You do not need to focus on one sport. Okay, now it's a free country. There's worse things people can do. If it's golf and it's Tiger Woods or it's, Serena, whatever, that's not a bad thing. But I think just in general, when you look at the history of the development of our quote unquote better athletes, and that includes just better high school athletes, the athlete will follow the body. The athlete will follow the person. To be an athlete, you have to be athletic. I think those are accepted maxims in this world. So that's all possible. Yes, when you reach the pinch point of 13, 14, 15, it is difficult unless you have a helicopter. But even if you have a helicopter, if you're trying to play hockey and baseball at a good level, it's hard. Hockey and lacrosse, it becomes hard. That's where the business of sport now is intersecting, because lacrosse used to be purely a spring sport in New England. It was like a 9-week sport. Now it's a 12-month sport. Soccer used to be a fall sport. Now it's a 12-month sport. Hockey used to be the winter. The MDC rinks, the state rinks, most of the rinks opened around Halloween. Now we have rinks open 12 months a year. And I don't begrudge them, because people have put a lot of money into those facilities. The upside is we have access to ice 12 months a year. To play hockey, there's a lot worse things 13-year-olds could be doing in the summer than going to a rink for an hour or two. Baseball obviously used to be sort of a spring, early summer sport. Now we have indoor facilities. We have clubs. They jump on planes. They travel. They play. That has helped the level of our New England baseball player. But the early years, yeah, I mean, I've talked, I've read, I've met people 35 years, whatever it's been. My own observation of kids, they're going to benefit, and they're also going to benefit from music. They're going to benefit from English class. They're going to benefit from exposure to coding, all of it, the development of the person. The other thing I'll mention now too is, the other thing I will mention is, I think people be surprised how smart the better players are. I think a year, maybe it's old. Oh, dumb hockey players. No, these better players, they're bright. They're bright. And they always have been, really. You look, I don't know Ray Bork very well at all, but a very seasoned person and the feel that he has. Sidney Crosby, a very seasoned person, the feel that he has of a lot of things, impressive. You don't get that good without a lot.
Given that, not just in sport, but as you were just mentioning in music, in the arts, and in whatever your pursuit is, everything is moving. There's all this pressure towards specialization. How do you think about being a generalist and the pressure towards specialization, and what advice do you have for families today trying to navigate between those? And I mean, granted, you might just say each to their own. It's a free country. Like, choose the path that works best for you. But I mean, especially coming from a place like Milton that has so many different activities and breeds such well-rounded kids, yet has such great specialization. Like, how do you have both of those without just breaking?
Well, there's a lot of players now so maybe dads who are now 40 years old or 32 years old, or some of them are 40 something years old that I coached years ago that I run into, or that reach out and say, hey, my kid's 6 or my kid's 9. And some of them are like, what's going on out here? This is nuts. Like, yeah, you're right. It is. Good luck. But I always usually say first of all, you'll figure it out, because you're smart and you've been through it yourself, and you'll be able to sense what's right, what's probably not right. And you'll navigate it. The other thing I've always believed too, though, is that any player could have done, let's just say 20% less. The outcome would not be any different. Okay. Brian Boyle and Corey Schneider were just on NHL Network, so those guys are doing great, by the way. Talk about guys who are incredibly bright and articulate. I remember Corey as a young kid. I don't know if he even spoke, but now he's unbelievable. Just take those two, for example. Brian Boyle, he was a good athlete as a kid, obviously had some length, went to St. Sebastian's. If he did 20% more, would his life have been different? And if he did 20% less, would his life have been different? I don't believe it would. I think you have certain particular skills and abilities and potential that, as long as you're in a reasonable situation, you will reach your potential. And I think, we learn a lot from plants. So, another great expression, I think this is a Buddhist expression: in the spring, there will be growth. So for all the hockey families out here right now in November that are doing all sorts of things, in the spring, there will be growth. How much growth, what that exactly is going to look like, we don't know. But what does a plant need? Plant needs some water, not too much. Plant needs some sunlight, not too much. A plant needs some oxygen. I'm not sure what the too much or too little is in that world. But if a plant has that, it's going to grow. And if it's meant to be 10 feet tall, it'll be 10 feet tall. If in that plant's DNA, it's not meant to be 10 feet tall, if you water it too much, you're going to cause a problem. So a lot of this, to a certain extent, is out of our control. I mean, you and I debated that a little bit about a week ago. We don't control everything. And I'm not sure in some cases if we control anything in any domain.
I wrestle with this topic. It's hard for me I can debate it, but it's almost just playing devil's advocate with myself, because I could argue both sides. But I can't help but notice, as I navigate and talk to all these people that have played the game for a long time at a really high level, right, that you have players who are third generation NHLers who have the physical attributes, have the mindset, have the, like, it was kind of like truly in their blood. And then you have other players who like overcame all odds and like, not only did no one else think they could do it, but it never even crossed their mind that they could do it. Right. And who by just sheer will and scrapping and clawing without any of the stuff, right, found a way to get there. Right. And so, yeah, I guess how do you reconcile those two? The fact that, you know, kind of, 80% of it is what you have versus these outlier stories of people that don't seem to have any of it and still find a way.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things we do know too. There's about 6 billion people walking around this planet. Not a single one of them that I'm aware of has the same fingerprint. Not a single one of them has the exact same DNA. Even identical twins. So we know that. What we also know, you and I could take the SAT or test or GRE, MCAS, whatever. You and I could get the exact same score. So that means you and I are the same, right? No. We got the same score, or close to the same score. How did we get to that point? What is our temperament? What is our view? What is our processing speed? We might have got the same score. I finished the test 30 minutes before you finished the test. Or you finished the test an hour before me. We got the same score. So my own journey, I started coaching 1990, AIC, Gary Wright, Larry O'Donnell, graduate assistant right out of Hamilton College. Great experience. Was going to get
just showed up at the rink, just found your way to the office, introduced yourself.
Yeah. Took the tie off, Mass Mutual. The guys that worked at Mass Mutual have killed it. I think about that every now and then. But hey, for me, that was my journey. I spent the morning at Mass Mutual, think I was going to go into sales, and stopped in. And but that was the beginning of quote unquote coaching. I'd say it was about 4, 5, 6 years later when it started to dawn on me, like, I'm working with these groups, wherever it was, or whatever team it was, a group of forwards, a group of D, whatever. And I'm giving them all basically the same information, and they're doing the same activities. What I can see is we're getting very different results within the group. So why is this? That led me on a journey sort of into the brain and learning and teaching and temperament and feelings. And you realize, and I think any teacher out there would obviously second this, that, and it's all fluid. There's no, even if, okay, you've started 2 or 3 months and you've got let's just say one of the players or one of the students is in the caboose. We don't know how that train ride's going to end. That player that's in the caboose in November could end up being up front at the end of the season, or that particular year you're in the caboose, but 3 years later, you're in the front of the train. And the same, that the players that are in the front of the train or the students that are in the front of the train. And this is going to continue really all through our lives. And I think for whatever reason, a lot of us struggle with the fact that it's not clear, it's not more concrete, it's not more definable. Often, I think I told you, talk to groups of coaches, and some of them are carpenters. And you can say, okay, well, you're a carpenter, and you can look at a particular job, and then you can make a list of what you need, and you can get it, and then you have a sense of how long it's going to take you. And you know what? After a day, you've built what you want to build. Whereas working with people, it's yeah, and day to day. I just watched a little golf over the weekend. Rory McIlroy, a little hard for me to say. He flubbed a shot like it was an iron shot that went 30 yards on the ground. arguably the best golfer in the world, or one of the top 10, whatever you want to put them. And that can happen. And, who lost? Edmonton lost 9-0, 10-0 to Colorado last week. Like, it can happen. So Red Sox roll in.
Another thing, and this is, again, we can ask it in the hockey context, but it is more of a life thing, is, so I've heard you talk about how you were a college coach, and when it came time to have a family, you thought that the prep school life and a house on the Cape would be a better fit for your whole self, right? And your family's life, right? And I've also heard you reflect that was a great decision. I'm going through something similar where if you had asked me in my early 20s, like, work was the only thing that mattered, and like outsized ambition in work and achievement in work and my brand, as a technology entrepreneur. And I was like, everything was just about, like, it was all on the work. Right. And now it's much more about balance, even at the expense of future achievement professionally. Right. How have you balanced that, and what advice do you have for those trying to balance it? And I can ask that as a dad and as a person, but then there's that same question in terms of what you impart on your kids as well as a parent.
Yeah, for me, and I laugh because, again, I specifically remember the 90s and work in summer hockey schools, and, Phil Grady, my coach at Hamilton College, great guy, and Donnie Unger out there, and Peter Sears from Oswego, played in the 72 Olympic team, and just a bunch of guys you work with. And a lot of them had their kids at the hockey school with them as campers too. So I thought that was pretty neat. But those were guys who told me, they said, the best job in hockey is to get a job at a prep school and a house down the Cape. I was like, seemed to make sense even to my young self. And I spent 12 years in college hockey. And I was getting to the point with my wife and I where, what are we going to do here? So I think it was a great decision. It was a great experience on so many levels. But once again, we all have to, let's go back to 6 billion people and trying to figure out life and what works and what are you? What do you do for a living? And how could, this morning we're actually, again, playing hockey with those guys, and traffic is insane over there on the expressway. I don't know how people commute into the city every day. Some do it a few times a day. Some have to do it every day. The other thing I think we all know is nothing is perfect. Nothing is perfect. Working at a prep school is not perfect. Not everybody can work at a boarding school. Not everybody can work in a hospital. Not everybody can work in a high octane business environment. So what works for everybody and every family? And then you got a husband who might do one thing and a wife who does another thing. And how many kids do you have and how old are they? And we all got to figure it out. And I think most do. And understanding that, again, nothing's going to be perfect.
And I mean, bringing that back around to Milton Academy and prep school in general, super competitive, more competitive than ever, especially with the pandemic, right? Because, there's been so much appetite and interest to get into the private schools with the smaller classes, more hands-on, more seen, right? Better resources, for better or for worse, right? And because of that, you can have the grades and you can have the test scores and you can interview well and you could, like, whatever, you can have all the things and still not get in anywhere, right? And so because of that, as a parent, there's a lot of pressure to, like, make sure that your kids have all their ducks in a row if that's a path that you aspire to. At the same time, like, kids need to learn for themselves, and sometimes the best way for them to learn for themselves is to, like, stop hovering and let them fail. Let them, like, step on their own sword and feel the pain and learn the hard way, right? But if they do that, then maybe they lose their shot, and then they'll look back later and they'll have regret, right? So how do you balance that, right? Helping your kids keep the train on the tracks versus not doing it for them and letting them fail.
Hey, again, if there was a formula, if there was something any of us had to say, hey, you do, and then within the same house, it can be 3 different kids or 2 different kids. And going to Milton or going to St. Seb's or going to Nobles or going wherever is not a guarantee of anything. And, for some kids, okay, going to BC High BC High is an awesome place. It's been an awesome place for a long time. Will continue to be. Is that two brothers? BC High might be a perfect place. And then for the other brother, Dedham High might be the perfect place, or Hingham High, or Catholic Memorial, or whatever it might be. So how people just navigate that. We do live in a geographic area that I haven't done a study, but I can't imagine there's too many other places on the planet that have as much academic/athletic offerings as the 15 miles around where I'm sitting right now. Matter of fact, the 7 miles around where I'm sitting, it's staggering. So that does create, it's kind of like hockey in Toronto, hockey in Montreal, hockey in Boston. You have a large population, you have a lot of programs, you have a lot of people, and you have a fair amount of money, and you have competitive people. So that creates this sort of stew of something. I'm not sure what to call it. So it's funny, with that said, arguably the leading goal scorer, the leading American player came from Scottsdale, Arizona. Did not come from Boston, did not come from Michigan, did not come from Minnesota, did not come from New Jersey, did not. You got the idea.
Well, but did that mean that he, grew up playing AAA hockey for a team that, in order to play a competitive schedule, needed to be on planes every week, and in order to do that, needed to homeschool, and right?
And I'm not intimately familiar with Austin, Matt. I remember he was playing for the Bobcats and that crew, and then they had the PF Changs. I'm not sure
I don't know any of his details.
Yeah, crew. Yeah. By the time I was 15, 14, they were getting on planes and all that, which is fine. But I would go back to his development years again, the mini rink that they had in Scottsdale there at age 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I can't imagine that his squirt team, they went on My Hockey Rankings to see that they were the 7th team in the country. It was often argued years back that if Sidney Crosby didn't grow up in Nova Scotia, instead he grew up in Mississauga, you might have a different. Now that's just it's a armchair discussion, but would you have had a different product? The pressure, I hate to use that word, but it exists. The level of competition, the people, the egos in a metropolitan area are certainly a factor. Whereas growing up, outside of Halifax is a different experience as a boy. We never have the answer. We don't have the answer to any of this, which is, I guess, allows me to be a part of it. This isn't engineering or calculus.
Something else that I've found tricky to navigate is, as you look at different schools, I think one of the pieces of advice that many people give, and I think you might have even given this to me, is imagine if your kid got injured and couldn't play a day of hockey, would the school be the right fit, right? And I think, would he or she be happy at the school? And I think that's a great test. And I've also heard you say that the road's gotten so much harder to play in college, don't even think about it. Don't optimize for it. Just go and choose the right spot. And if the kid rises up, right, then deal with it then, right? But if you balance that with the fact that in order to just play in high school, kids are repeating once or sometimes even twice. And it's one thing if you're like a Celebrini and it's obvious you should be optimizing for the sport, right? But if you're just kind of like a solid player, you kind of worry if you don't start optimizing for it and making decisions around it, such as reclassing, right? Then you're kind of torching your kids' chances to even have a high school sports experience. So how can those two coexist, and how should you navigate that as a parent or as a family?
Yeah, and again, I can't give an answer to to everybody. I think the term we've always used, though, and I still believe this too, is that the hockey will take care of itself. As long as you're in a reasonable, for every player you can tell me that came through Shattuck or came through, Belmont Hill or came through something, I'll give you another player just as good that came from a different place. So there's no, if 90% of all the hockey players came from Honey Baked, well, it probably tells you that you need to go play for Honey Baked, but that's not true. So, you've got players now coming from Switzerland and Finland and small towns and big cities and Florida and Texas and Boston. And so the hockey will take care of itself. When you're a young kid and a teenager, at most you're going to be involved with hockey 2 hours a day, maybe 3 hours a day when you're a game or something at a prep school or wherever you are. So there's another 21 hours in the day. So you can balance that. The other thing I would say is that there's lots of families right now that, yeah, in some aspects you get pinch points, you get, oh boy, but they are doing it. Hopefully I wasn't misquoted. I could never say, oh, don't even think about playing college hockey. Yes, the road has got much more difficult. There's no question. But it's great to have goals. And again, if the goal of your child is to be a high-level computer coder, well, you're not going to suppress that. I think in any parent, you're going to support or provide what you can for your children to pursue their interests. And then it's up to individual family of where's that needle? Where's that needle? I got a friend who moved his two boys from Chicago to Connecticut years ago. They started playing hockey out by Naperville, where the Steel are now, ironically. And they started playing hockey as young kids. Then his job brought him back to Connecticut. And when they got to Connecticut, the next fall, he told his boys, he says, unfortunately, guys, there's no hockey in Connecticut. So you can play football, soccer, lacrosse. Here's the list. 6. He told me it's no hockey. I love it. And I think one boy ended up playing college football. One boy ended up playing college lacrosse. But as a family, that's how he dealt. He's like, I'm not going to take these two kids to the rink at 5, driving to Philly, signing up for Mid-Fairfield or the Connecticut Junior Rangers. He goes, that's nuts. Now, that's his decision. Now, the Mid-Fairfield's a great program. Connecticut Junior Rangers is a great program. That particular family, that's how the father and the mother handle that particular situation. Again, free country. How do you spend that's the other side we always talk about. Okay, you have X amount of time, you have X amount of energy, and you have X amount of money that you're willing to allocate to anything. So as a family, or even as a teenage boy, how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your energy? And usually there's a financial commitment. So it's a choice. If you want to join the Y for $15 a month in the summer, you can. You want to go to a higher level strength and conditioning program for $1,500 in the summer where you meet with a coach and, at a particular time, you can. And each family with each child and each situation, they make their decisions.
Well, the only constant in life is change, and hockey's certainly no exception, although it does feel like the pace of change in hockey and maybe even in life is accelerating. But I just look at the changes in the sport, and you're closer to it than I am, but you see like the portal, you see NIL, you see the Canadian major juniors, you see, prep kids not returning for their senior years, you see, freshman age getting older and older, you see, Black Bear running around and buying up rinks and clubs and digital services and whatever, and the sport increasingly becoming more privatized. What are the biggest changes on your mind, and what do you worry about most as you look towards the future of the game?
Well, there's more choice, as you just outlined. The menu is thick. In the 80s, as I alluded to when I grew up, if you went to buy sneakers, you probably had 3 or 4 choices. I recall Nike, Adidas, and Converse.
What
If
about
I go,
pumps? That was when I was in
yeah,
middle school. They were all the
wait,
rage.
I
I
think
don't know
I
if you
was
remember those. Yeah.
dating my, how old I am. I think the pumps, I think my name might have been after college. I can't recall, but those guys who created the pump are actually hockey guys. They're actually
Oh
still
yeah.
skating in Bach on Friday morning.
No,
I think
no
good old
way.
Kevin Leary. I'll give a shout out to Kevin. Might have had something to do with the pump. Billy McGinnis, maybe. I think they actually might argue about who is the creator. Anyways, we digress. But now, if I go to Dick's Sporting Goods today, there's like 3 walls of sneakers. Even within, say, the New Balance family, there's 42 different type of New Balance. So there's choice in everything, which is great on one side and, has some challenge points on another. But then it just becomes, up to us as to what we choose. But again, if you go back to what you can control, okay, the development of the athlete, and this might be a topic for another podcast. What do you do? Why do you do it? It's as simple as that. Whether it be the practice session on ice, whether it be a 3-minute pregame talk, whether it be a 4-minute postgame talk, whether it be an off-ice training session, whatever it might be, video. What do you do? Why do you do it? To allow for development within the player, within the group. That's something we can control. Once you have them, that is something that you can control. Obviously, the parents are going to make decisions about sort of signing up or that type of thing. But to me, that's a fascinating area. Probably not time right now for a deep dive in that area, but that to me is the never-ending question.
On the one hand, there's so much that can be taught, and you hear about the game's out of balance, too much individual skills, not enough IQ. They're not learning skills that are translatable enough to a game environment. They should be learning this way. They should be learning that way. The coaches need, like someone needs to coach the coaches, right? So there's kind of that whole narrative, right? But then I've heard you say on other shows that that actually, like, if we could just get, or you didn't say it quite this way, but you were talking about how if you look at the best athletes in any town, right, like how many of them are actually playing hockey, right? And probably far less than half, right? And so if you could only, you didn't say this, but I'm then saying, well, if that's the case, right, if you could get more of the best athletes to play the sport and stick with the sport, that alone would bring the caliber of the game up so much. Which one of those do you think would be more impactful? Is it about inclusivity and getting more people into the sport, or is it about working better with what you've got?
Well, both, right? I mean, I think USA Hockey does a good job. That's their sort of mission, is trying to get as many players as we can involved, many kids, give opportunity to play hockey, and then educate coaches and parents about what might be the best development paths or what development should look like. So both. And when I say the best players, the better athletes in a town, I usually talking about Massachusetts. Although I think it would extend out into New York. I think it would extend out into California, New Jersey, other places too. Your better athletes in Florida are generally playing football and baseball, basketball, same in California. But again, what can we control? Well, the kids who have signed up for hockey, we have them. So we can, or the word is control, but we can manage the experience that those kids have, whether they're the best athlete in the town of Needham or a mid-level, whatever they are. We can control, or we can manage the experience that those kids have and give those kids the opportunity to enjoy the sport, to play the sport, and develop as best they can. And I think all said and done, honestly, I think we do a great job. Yeah, I know there's a lot out there, Massachusetts. Well, the world has changed. I mean, Jim Craig and Mike Eruzione and, Boston hockey, the world has changed. Boston has changed, and the rest of the world has changed. So we're never going back to that. But all said and done, there's so many great people out there right now, both in the Boston area and throughout the country, that are working with the kids, doing a great job in a variety of ways. The kids have a lot of opportunity to play hockey. That is a positive. A lot more opportunity than we had. So I think just continuing to work with that group of coaches, which is what I try to do. My life right now is to work with some players, to work with some groups, to work with some teams, to work with a particular coach or to work with a group of coaches, and just have these conversations about what might be the best given the circumstances that you have, whether it be the age, whether it be the amount of kids, whether it be the competitive level. What might be the best way to use your time and your energy and your resources?
You're probably getting tired of getting asked this question, but I know that in some parts of the country, there's a lot of talk about issues around the New England hockey model. And I know I have some guests scheduled who I haven't recorded with yet, who come from other parts of the world, like Minnesota, who have a lot to say about the road to nowhere and how the funnel's not getting filled and how kids are getting anointed as winners too early, and those aren't the right kids, and everyone's not getting brought along, and so like there's a reason why out the other side you see less and less people playing the game at the highest levels coming from Massachusetts. I mean, you kind of already said it, but I'll ask you anyways. As a lifelong New England and Massachusetts guy who's devoted your life to coaching hockey at some incredibly prestigious levels, how do you feel?
Well, again, I think in this area, there's a lot of really good things going on, obviously. We don't have 6 boys anymore. Okay, you don't have 6 boys. I don't have 6 boys. I don't know any family that has 6 kids. When I grew up, we had 3 in my family. We were a small family. Now 3 is a bigger family. So having just a big brood of kids, and it wasn't all the boys in that particular family that made it to the NHL. It was 1 or 2 of the boys. So the barrier to entry has become more challenging. There's no question. The time and the money that it takes for a family, for a competitive, any level of hockey, and then in particular, a higher competitive level, is a barrier of entry. There's no question. That same barrier of entry in the town of Milton doesn't exist in the football program. Football has its own challenges, but that barrier of entry, the barrier of entry for Little League or 6-year-old T-ball is not very high. You enroll your kid in maybe not 6-year-old hockey, but 8-year-old hockey, you're going somewhere. You're going to Springfield. You're going to wherever you're going at all hours, and oftentimes both weekend days. So it chews up your whole weekend. If your kid's in 8-year-old baseball, he might have 1 game Saturday morning in the town, 5 minutes away. You're home by 10 a.m. You got the rest of the, the financial and time commitment for hockey is significant. It's always going to be there. I can't control that. I can't. Again, in my life, I'm focusing on, okay, whoever's there, whenever they are there, what do we do? And why do we do it?
And last topic I figured would be a good one to end on is there's some talk out there about how it's too much individual skills, dribbling around cones, not translatable to game environment. What's really suffering is IQ, and there's some debate out there about whether IQ can be taught, and what do we even mean by IQ? How do you define hockey IQ, and in your mind, can it be taught?
And again, this is probably something we could come back and spend a solid hour on just this topic. But well, there's no question that, okay, a warm-up for an athletic activity. All right, I'm not a physiologist. I'm not a doctor. I know you're surprised to hear that. But the warm-up should look somewhat like the activity that you're going to do. So, practice environment, should look similar to what the game environment looks like. Just take that without debate. Okay. So in a game of hockey, it never happens that a player skates after a whistle is blown in a straight line to a certain distance and does something and then goes back in a line. Okay, that never happens in a game of hockey. Is there a place for something like that with younger kids? Possibly, yes. But the practice environment should look like the game environment. Hockey is played with the brain. The brain controls every physical movement, every reaction to what you're seeing visually or what you're hearing. So thinking, decision-making, call it decision training, should be somewhat omnipresent. The game is also competitive, so a lot of the activities you're doing should probably be competitive. That rising tide, again, you create this sort of stew, you create this tossed salad. That rising tide will lift all boats. That's been my observation over a period of time. So I'll go back again, in the spring, there will be growth. If what you're doing on the ice, that there's a little bit of speed afoot, and the speed's going to come probably from competition more than anything, and you've got work with the hands. Baseball, you hold a bat. Baseball, you have a glove. Baseball, you throw. It's a lot of sort of upper body. Yes, the lower body's a ball, blah, blah, blah. But hockey's everything. And that's the other part for all of us. It's a really hard sport. Okay, it's really hard. All sports are hard. Hockey's really hard. There's a lot of things. And that's why you see these people spending all this time and thinking. A lot of things have to come together, maybe more than any other sport, because again, you're doing it on a 16th of an inch of a blade on slippery ice. That's hard. That hurts. There's boards and glass, pucks. A basketball player goes to the backboard. I mean, Rick Rambis did this for the LA Lakers back in the 80s, but you can't take a basketball player out. You can take a hockey player out. Okay, it's really hard. And you're out there for 30, 50 seconds. Your heart rate is going to 90% max, and you're being hit, and you're processing information. Whew. So, two things there. Yes, then your practice environment should resemble that, because that's what you're practicing for. And if you're going up to a cone and you're making a predetermined move, and then you go to another cone, well, that's not going to happen when you play the game.
So last question we can end on, which is more of a personal one, but I mean, I know you're still active. I doubt you'd call yourself retired, although maybe you do. But your portfolio looks different than it did a few years ago, and for the decades before that. Do you miss it?
Some things you miss, some things you don't miss. I love my life right now. I love the ability to do this, and I love the ability to play hockey early this morning, and I love the ability to do the things I'm going to do this afternoon. So, I'm out of that sort of structured. My haves are not as many, which is great. And also now, just like this, I can toy with some things that I've been thinking about, and I can go places and apply some of these ideas. And I like to think I can help some people. I can help some kids, and I can help some coaches, and just in conversation. And they're helping me. Like I continue, 35 years, whatever it's been, I continue to learn things every day. And again, the game's evolving, life's evolving, the world's evolving, technology's evolving. I like to think I'm still evolving. So it's a ton of fun because I get to do more of what I want to do. And I think, you have different people on. When you're in college, you're spending so much time on recruiting, traveling, logistics. The hockey's actually like 10% maybe of what you're actually doing at times. Prep school is great, but you're teaching classes. You've got all these meetings. I'm not a big fan of meetings. I don't mind telling you. So all that's sort of off the plate, and more freedom to dig into things that I really enjoy.
Coach, I mean, this was such a great discussion. I learned so much from you every time we speak, not just about hockey, but about life. So I'm really appreciative that you made the time. I always enjoy it. Is there anything I didn't ask that you wish I did, or any parting words for listeners?
No, it's just been great. And, again, conversation and sharing ideas, all of us. There's no one, if there's no secret sauce, okay, in hockey or in lots of things, human development. But we all continue to think about things. And again, with the goal of, hey, let's provide these kids with the best experience we can and give them the best opportunity to have a good time and develop as people and develop as athletes. And I'll share one more real impactful thing for me. Early 90s, I go down to Long Island, just starting coaching. And my college roommate was from Long Beach, gave me an excuse, go down there, hop hog, exit 60 off the LIE, work for 5 days, then go to Long Beach for the weekend, have a good time with my roommate, a couple other guys. I'm 23 years old, blah, blah, blah. I get paired with Alexei Nikiforov. Okay, and if anybody's listening, they want to Google him, you can. Alexei Nikiforov. So he's a Russian guy, new to the United States at the time, and basically spoke no English. Okay, except for a few swear words. I happen to also know those swear words. I'm not sure how much Russian. Just get Alexei's. So I'm paired with him, and he kind of leading the way, and boy, he ran just unbelievable, call it practices, on ice sessions, training sessions, whatever you want to call them. And I went back the second summer, worked with him some more. And you'll see Chris Higgins from way out past exit 60 became captain of the Montreal Canadiens. What are the chances back then that a kid from way out on Long Island go to Yale, went to Avon, went to Yale, became captain of the Montreal Canadiens? They had 3 first-round picks in 1 year: Komisarek, Nystrom, and could it have been Higgins? I might be missing a guy. I mean, I could keep going. That Alexei tree down there in that pocket. Kid who's the assistant at Harvard now, 2 syllables, played for the Walpole Stars, went to BU, Hobie Baker winner, forgetting his name. Working with him at Harvard is James Marcoux, another Alexei guy, All-American at UMass. We had Pat McNally at Milton Academy, Robbie O'Gara, a little bit of Alexei guy. Then a bunch of kids that were really good players that maybe didn't. Jason Guerrero, All-American at Northeastern.
He'll be on the show.
Yeah. So all of them, and ask any of them about it. But for me as a young coach, he didn't speak English. Okay, and so it kind of goes to that maxim of he's not teaching me a lot, but I'm learning a lot. And I learned a lot from Alexei. He couldn't speak to me. I had an idea what he was saying. So to me, it was just, again, another seminal moment. I'm like, okay, it's not like, here's a book, or I'm going to tell you how to play hockey, or I'm going to correct you, blow a whistle. Whoa, wait, no, you should be facing this way. And the other thing all the Alexei kids had, like Guerrero, McNally, who's the kid that's the assistant at Harvard right now, played at BU?
I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah. But all those kids, obviously Hobie Baker winner. I mean, he's a great story. You should get him on. Walk on at BU.
Oh, I'm going to find him.
And I also believe he walked on as a forward. Maybe Brian DeRocher or Michael Bavis were the assistant coaches. He walked on, I believe, as a forward. And then Adam Gilroy. And he wins the Hobie Baker as a defenseman. So again, a path that, an outlandish path. But my point is, all of those players, you could kind of tell they had been around Alexei. It's a little like Gary Dineen, the old Springfield Picks. I used to think his teams had that. There's a certain verve to their team. They had a certain style. They made plays. Even if they weren't the best players on the team, they had a certain confidence the way they played, a certain puck movement. A lot of Alexei's guys, I would say, you could tell, you could see his fingerprint on them. But for all that we're worried about here, again, for all this and all that, here's a guy that didn't speak English, that just provided activities for the players so that in the spring there would be growth. They didn't all win the Hobie Baker. They didn't all play in the NHL. They didn't all play Division I college hockey, but they all benefited. The Deutsch brothers. Aaron Deutsch was a kid who came to Milton Academy. We used to call him the Rajon Rondo of prep school hockey. He won a championship in 2011. He was one of the D with McNally. Sean Doherty was a goalie, another Long Island kid. I kept up my contacts with Alexei. You can see through the years. It was a bond. It's good to know who those kids were down there. But they all benefited from being around him. And here's a guy that could not speak English.
I got to track him down too. I want Alexei.
Yeah, well, he'd be an interesting, he's, a bunch of us could do our imitations of Alexei, but what a guy, loves hockey and way ahead of his time, as so many coaches were. But again, just an example. You can't overthink this. It's sort of a simple game. And if kids have exposure to what's reasonable, and then they have a genetic compatibility with the sport, then you're going to get something. And if they don't, then it doesn't matter what you do. You could have Bruce Cassidy and Marco Sturm and Peter Chiarelli and Don Sweeney all live at your house,
All right, Coach. Well, I think that's a good point to end on. Thanks again for coming on the show. And I will keep talking your ears off at the gym, for better or for worse.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to Puck Academy. If you enjoyed this episode, follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcast and share it with someone serious about their game. See you next week.